Greetings everyone and welcome to another video. As you see here, we're ranking the theatrically released Spider-Man movies, starting with Sam Raimi's 2002 film all the way up to Far From Home. For some reason Spider-Man 3 is on here twice, not sure why, but we're just going to ignore it. I'm not sure if I should rename these tiers. This is kind of just like a template or whatever. But honestly, I don't think there's any film on here that is below a C, so we're just gonna ignore the last two. That's kind of a spoiler for the video, but whatever. I just really like all these films. There's not really one that I can say I hate. But let's get started. Spider-Man 1. S tier. Yeah, it's kind of cheesy now, but that's just the thing I love about the film is its cheesiness. It's just such a good time when you watch it. There's like it set up Spider-Man so perfectly in this series of films. It's a great origin story. It has great pacing, great cast, great characters. Willem Dafoe's The Green Goblin is always a classic. Yeah, I really, what else is there to say about this one? It's honestly, near perfect. Some of the CGI is kind of wonky, but I still think, for the time, it's decent. The only thing I wish was different about this film was because 9/11 impacted this film a lot. There's a lot of scenes they had to cut or alter to where the Twin Towers weren't in any focus shots. I do wish that we could see a director's cut with them in it. I think that would be really cool. I understand why they had to take them out, but I do wish that we could maybe get that someday. Because the 20th anniversary is going to come up in a year, so maybe something like that could be announced. Yeah. Next film, Spider-Man 2. This one is a bit of an interesting one for me. This is probably the one Raimi film I probably have the least nostalgia for. I don't know why. Maybe I just haven't seen it that much, or maybe, I don't know. Maybe nothing really stuck out about it to me, but I still really like the film. It's a good sequel, and that's really rare to see, even back then. It's a very solid movie. The only thing I don't like about it is the middle part of the movie, the second act. I just find it to be kind of boring and a little too drawn out. The movie feels longer than it is because of this section. It's like a full half hour to 45-minute section just focusing on Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and it's not really building any romance. In some ways it is, but it's not presented that way, which is kind of weird. Plus, there's this arc about Mary Jane getting engaged to Jameson's son, the astronaut, and I feel like this is just kind of like a filler plot, and it kind of takes me out of the movie a little bit. But that's really my only complaint with it. The rest of the film is great. It starts great, it ends great. The action sequences are better than the first film. It does some things better than the first film, but I will say the pacing is kind of what brings it down a little bit for me. But I'm still going to put it in A tier because it's still a great movie. And in some respects, it is better than the first film. But I think for my subjective reasoning, I just don't really think it's as good as the first one. Or at least I would prefer to watch the first one over this one. Alright, Spider-Man 3. This one is interesting to say the least. Because this film was the first one that I actually saw in theaters. So this one is probably the one I have the most nostalgia for, either that or the first one. But I will admit this movie does have flaws. It is a bit chaotic. There's a lot of characters, a lot of villains, a lot of plot lines, and the movie is trying its best to give each one the spotlight, and you can tell it doesn't do that very well. But I will say this is probably the funniest movie of the three films, because this movie is just so wacky. Especially that whole diner scene. That was just... you just can't see something like that in today's films. You just can't. I do think this film is insanely underrated, though. People tend to look at the flaws a lot more than some of the movie's strengths. The effects are pretty good in this, except for when Harry and Peter are fighting down the alley. Just the green screen effects are not very good there, but I do think most of the effects in this film are pretty good. This film was pretty expensive to make. It was maybe $250,000 for the budget, but I think it's because a lot of the film had to be reshot because of Sony's intervention with this movie. They wanted to put Venom and the symbiote and put all these characters in, and it's just I think that kind of ruined the film for a lot of people. But I still think it's a decent film regardless of these flaws. So I'm going to put it in B tier. And then next is The Amazing Spider-Man 1. This film has kind of had its ups and downs with me. If I was ranking this film maybe a year ago, I probably would have put it in F. But honestly, I think it's grown on me some. This is definitely a very different film than the Raimi films. And part of me likes that about it, but the film also kind of retreads on a lot of stuff from the first movie. The whole with great power comes great responsibility thing, and a lot of the things in the first movie that they kind of retread on just kind of get rushed. Uncle Ben's death really seemed rushed in this movie. And that's the problem I have with the movie overall. It just suffers from poor pacing. The first real fight scene of the movie is not until maybe 2/3 of the movie. It's when they're in the sewers. I don't really count the bridge scene as a fight scene because it's mostly just, Spider-Man just saving people from cars or people that are trapped in cars. But I still think it's a solid movie. It's definitely a more grounded movie. You can kind of see films around this time period going for a more grounded approach, like The Dark Knight. And I do think this film is a little better than what I made it out to be. I do really like Gwen Stacy, and I think Andrew Garfield's pretty underrated. The villain was actually alright, too. I really like him when he's not the Lizard. I feel like when he is the Lizard, he's just kind of goofy, but not really in a funny way. But I really like the cinematography in this movie. I do wish that some of the scenes from the trailers found their way into this movie, especially that long take when Spider-Man's swinging. It's I don't really understand why they cut that portion out. It's there, but they cut it out. They cut out most of that scene to where it's just in a montage. So I don't know. That was always kind of confusing to me. I think the film had a bit more action throughout the movie. Not too much, but just enough to kind of keep the beginning part a little more exciting. I think it would have been a little better for me, probably A, but I'm going to put it B next to Spider-Man 3. Now, Amazing Spider-Man 2. This one is a bit of a mess. I won't lie. I will say the first third of the movie is pretty good. But I think when Electro becomes the villain, I think that's kind of when the movie starts to decline. And again, similar to Spider-Man 3, it's because of Sony's intervention. They wanted to include more characters so they can start an expanded universe with the Sinister Six and create more sequels and spin-offs. And I think Sony needs to learn to just keep their grubby hands off these movies, because that's what's ruining them. And I feel like it hit this film the hardest because this film does have some great moments, but I feel like they could have been handled better, especially towards the end of the movie. I'm not going to spoil anything for those who haven't seen it, but I mean, it could have been so much more impactful if the movie just could have taken its time. So I'm gonna put it in C tier. It's good. It's got some good moments, but I don't think it just stands that well on its own. Okay. So next we have Spider-Man Homecoming. This is the first of the MCU films. I will say I do like Tom Holland as Spider-Man, but I don't think I like him as much as Peter Parker. He just feels he just feels really dependent. And we'll kind of get to that in the next movie that he's in, but I think Homecoming's decent. I think it's good, but I'm not sure if I could say that it's better than any of these films. I just don't think it's possible. I do like the villain. The Vulture, I think, is really good in this movie. And I do like that it's not an origin story, because that's one thing that would have really turned me off from seeing this movie if it was just an origin story. So I'm pretty glad that his introduction wasn't just we gotta see Uncle Ben get shot again, we gotta see him get his powers and everything like that. And I do like some of the other characters. I like Ned. I like that he's not, Harry again. I kind of like that he's just a chill dude that just happens to be friends with Peter Parker. So, and the action scenes are pretty good. But I don't think, it just is not as good as the Raimi trilogy, in my opinion. So I'm going to put it in B tier. I think above Amazing Spider-Man. Alright, and then next we have Venom. And for those wondering if Venom 2 is on this, I haven't seen Venom 2, and it doesn't appear to be on this list, so I'll leave it up to you to tell me where you would put it. Just put it in, tell me if you put it in S, A, B, C, D, F, so just whatever. But as far as Venom goes, I think it's a decent film. I'd watch it again. But I don't know if it's that great of a movie. It doesn't really have any impactful scenes or anything. It's kind of it's a little bit like the Raimi films, but not quite at that style. I'm gonna put it in C above Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, Spider-Verse is a bit of an interesting one. Because back in the day, I really praised the Raimi films. I thought nothing could top them. But I think Spider-Verse is deserving of an S tier. I don't think I like it as much as the first film, but I do think that is a very beautifully crafted movie. One thing I didn't really like about Homecoming and really the MCU Spider-Man is just how young he is. He's the youngest Spider-Man we've seen. And for some people they might like that, but for me, I really wanted to see like an older Peter Parker or like an older Spider-Man, and that's kind of what we got with Spider-Verse in a way. Like we were able to see like a perspective of like an older Peter Parker. And I think that was really well handled in this movie. I really love the visuals. I love the characters. It's pretty funny too. Like I really think like Spider-Verse is a great film. I would love to see a sequel to this. All right, and then next we have Far From Home. Now, I don't know if I really like this film. Mostly because I don't remember much about it. I think this film is pretty boring for the most part, or at least in the first couple of acts. The thing that redeems this film is the third act. I do like Mysterio in this film, but I think everything else is kind of lackluster. So I think I'm going to give it C tier above Amazing Spider-Man 2. And that's my list. And I know I'm probably going to get some backlash for putting the MCU films pretty low. I just don't know if I really like the changes they made. Like, making Aunt May, like, young and hot and having, like, Happy Hogan have a thing for her. It's like, I don't know why they did that. And again, like, the thing I didn't like about Far From Home is just how dependent, like, Peter Parker is in these movies. He's just, like, he's really trying to be, like, the next Iron Man, but he still has to have help from, like, other Avengers and even Iron Man himself. Like, Iron Man isn't even, like, really much of a concern in Far From Home, but he really, like, has a great presence in that movie, too. Even just the overall plot of this movie. So hopefully in No Way Home, I hope they can fix some of this stuff. And I may even redo this list once that movie comes out. I am really excited for it, and I hope it's good. I really want to see another trailer, though, because we haven't seen another trailer in, 2 months? Like, we're probably about due for another one, because it's almost November, and it has a December release date. So I'm really hoping that it actually holds up. So yeah, that was my list. Oh wait, I forgot to rank Spider-Man 3. It's the best one. Alright, see you all in the next video. Bye.